Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Today was originally supposed to be the date of the presidential primary on the Democratic side. Then it got moved to June, and then it got canceled this week by the State Board of Elections. That in turn has led to at least one lawsuit and a lot of complaints. Here to talk about what happened and why is Jay Jacobs, the chairman of the State Democratic Party. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Errol.
So now, Mr. Jacobs, you must have seen this coming to a certain extent, right? I mean, this was done pursuant to something that was slipped into the state budget law. I can't imagine something like this would happen without your knowledge. What was the idea here?
Well, I think originally, we had quite a lot of candidates on the ballot. And I think originally the idea was that candidates that had suspended their campaign are no longer running, and so we were going to be simplifying the ballot process to just between the candidates that were running. That was, I think, the idea originally. At that point in time, no one had really given thought to the fact that there wouldn't be a contest any longer between certainly Joe Biden or whomever at that time and Bernie Sanders.
Okay, so you've cleared. In fact, it's worth noting that it's not just Bernie Sanders. The action by the State Board of Elections clears out something like 9 candidates, at least one of whom, Andrew Yang, is now suing the State Board of Elections. To the extent that some candidates, for whatever reason, wanted to continue to accumulate delegates, don't they have, or shouldn't they have, the right to do that if they so choose?
Well, under normal circumstances, I don't think this would have been a question. We would always give people the opportunity to go to the ballot, certainly. Here, we have a very unusual circumstance. Number one, we have a predetermined outcome. I mean, it's clear. Joe Biden's going to be the nominee. Every one of these candidates, including Andrew Yang and including Bernie Sanders, has endorsed him. So he will be the nominee of the Democratic Party. So the outcome has been determined. And then the second part, which makes it imperative that we do something, is that we are in the grip of a worldwide pandemic centered right here in New York. And New York is suffering like no other state in the country, and frankly, not like many other places in the world. So we're dealing with something very serious, and having this primary made no sense because it would endanger the health and safety of poll workers and voters, quite frankly. In New York State, we have put a stop to all non-essential businesses. In my thinking, I think we should. And if this wasn't an example of a non-essential election, I don't know what is.
Okay. Well, now putting on your hat as the party leader who has to try and unify the party, what do you do about those who feel now disaffected? I think you gave a quote to my colleague Emily No saying that you were talking with both the Biden and the Sanders camps to try and figure out some split of delegates that would go to the convention. Is that the plan?
Right. Understand, this whole decision, and nobody wanted to make this decision, this whole decision was predicated on protecting the health and safety of poll workers and voters. It wasn't about trying to cut Bernie Sanders or his supporters out of the delegate selection process. That was never our objective. That is not our objective now, and we're not going to have that happen. What we are going to try to do is talk with both the Biden campaign and the Sanders campaign to see if we could come up with what we would consider, and everyone would consider, a fair distribution of the 184 delegates who were to be elected during the primary. If we do that and come up with that delegate split, then in my judgment, and I think everybody's judgment, frankly, virtually no harm is done, because the outcome being predetermined, now Sanders' campaign gets the delegates that they believe they would have been entitled to had they engaged in the primary, and at the meantime, we save some lives potentially. I think that's a good outcome.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, some of the political damage that is done, or for some of the down ballot candidates, some people who are especially insurgents, who are running for state offices, who are running for congressional offices, who hope to be on the ballot on the same day with Bernie Sanders to kind of run almost as a ticket. They don't get that opportunity now. Now, I understand part of that is between them and Bernie Sanders, right? I mean, he didn't have to suspend his campaign, so that's between them. On the other hand, there are some candidates who are going to have a harder time, right?
No, I think it's an unfair argument, Errol, and here's why. Number one, it was never meant to be, and originally was not slated to be the presidential primary on the same day as these down-ballot primaries. These were both on separate days. It wasn't until the coronavirus hit that the governor felt it was too soon. April 28th today would be too soon to have a presidential primary, so he moved it up to June 23rd. So that was, if you want to look at it that way, that was a bonus that just happened. It wasn't ever planned that way, and they shouldn't have planned on it. But I don't believe the premise, in my view. And I've been in politics a long time, and I've studied this. And if you take a look at what happened in South Carolina in the Democratic primary this year, in Virginia, what you find is this: activists, particularly far-left activists, the folks like the Democratic Socialists of America did very well in the AOC primary 2 years ago. All of that was because of low turnout. When you have low turnout, activists tend to magnify the strength of their vote because the moderates don't come out. When you have a high turnout election, like a presidential primary would be, then more moderates are going to come out, and that disadvantages the activists and helps the incumbents. So frankly, I think it's just the opposite. I think we've done something to disadvantage incumbents, not the reverse.
Okay. Interesting point. You'll know this because it's on everybody's mind. I'd love to say to you before we say goodnight, I'll see you in Milwaukee. Will I see you in Milwaukee? Are we going to have a convention?
I very much hope so. Look, I see the numbers coming down like you do. I think the governor has been getting more and more optimistic, although we're going to be cautious. I don't think we're going to take any chances, but by the end of August, I think it'll be a very different situation. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to go to Milwaukee. Perhaps we'll have to sit a little bit further apart, be a little bit smarter, no warm hugs and handshakes with old friends from across the country, but we'll make it work. And if it can possibly happen, we'll see to it that it does.
Okay, well, perhaps I will then see you out in Milwaukee. Jay Jacobs, thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
All right.